in the pending global reset. Left brain jobs will be wiped out by Google, robots, and outsourcing. The antidote is the unoutsourceable superpower of the flow state. Welcome to What the Flow, where we discuss making money easier, connecting deeper, and creating your own luck. And WTF, why we numb out, sabotage, and play small, and how to change it. It's Flow Time with Tony.
WTF. Welcome to What the Flow podcast. This is Tony Litzter, and I'm really excited that you've joined me today. And today's podcast, I'm going to talk about how to flow. I know I get messages from people that are like, okay, dude, you talked about the flow long enough. I get it. You talked about like changing your story and changing your mindset and all this, the myths and the lies and all these other things. Got it. Yeah, I know I'm an insecure overachiever, blah, blah, blah. How do you flow? Tell me how to do it. So in today's podcast, I'm going to talk about how to do that. And I couldn't think of any better place to do this than from actually being in a place of flow. So if you're not joining me on Instagram or on YouTube watching on the video, I am standing in the Boise River. And yes, it is October and it's cold. That's a different conversation. I wanted to come to this place that was where I first, as a child, I'd come and play in this place. And I learned about this process of swimming upstream and fighting the current versus going with the flow in life. And for those that are like tech people that are like, oh, how are you miking this? It's an old trick from these guys in the industry taught me, where you take toupee tape and you tape it to your chest and you tape the mic there. And then for those that really want to see the other part, it's really low tech. I tied my digital recorder to a tree. So with that, I want to get into this. There's this conversation of, okay, what do I do in order to get into this flow state? What are the actual mechanics of this process? And it was interesting because this morning, if you've been following the podcast, my family's had a financial crisis where a family member, because they had the legal title to something, did a little switcheroo and overnight fired about a dozen family members from a business that we've been building for 25 years. And that particular family member inherited the business. So they don't know actually how to run it. So it's quite a disaster that's taking place. And there was a lot of we got a new business started. You've heard the story. We've done all these things. We've got clients. We're up and running. And then the bitterness set in. Then the anger set in. Then the venom set in. This almost like this reality of going, like my uncle who started this business almost 30 years ago is wandering around, and he says about every 2 minutes he has this thought of I could have done this different, I could have done that different, and then he's like, what's happened that my sister would do this to me? It's like this fascinating psychological journey. And the problem is they're no longer in the flow state. They're no longer in creation mode. Anger is not a strategy. Remember this: when shit happens, when it hits the fan, when the WTF happens, anger is not a strategy. It's a natural emotion. It's something you should let yourself feel. It's one of the phases that you go through, and you shouldn't try to suppress it or stuff it or avoid it or pretend it's not there. Oh no, let it rage. Feel it. And then you have to get back to the flow state. You have to get back to strategy. So this morning I cracked the whip, and I'm like, I was a little pissed myself, and I'm like, I'm going home if you guys don't get your shit together. I'm not going to sit around here and just complain and create venomous strategies of all the legal strategies of the lawsuits and all that stuff. That's fine. Do all that stuff. But I'm not going to stick around. I'm creating in my life. And so what we basically, the logistics that I put in place this morning, I said, we as a team are going to get into the flow state every single morning. We're going to set a specific time to do this. And I did this. This is when I really started to learn this process. I did this in this company where we were in a battle with a business partner, and I had brought about $1 million to the table from people that trusted me, and it looked like the business was going to go bankrupt. And I started doing this in myself, and then with my business partner, and then with my managers, and pretty soon most of the team would get on this daily call where we would get into this flow state and then begin to make our strategy and put things in place. And so that's what I had to do just a little while ago. I'm like, I'm leaving, I'm going to the river. But here's what we're doing is every morning as a team, we're getting on this call. We're going to do strategies to get our bodies into the flow state. And then from there, we're going to identify our winning moves for the day. And then we're going to have accountability. We're going to give assignments and accountabilities for those that each had an assignment the previous day. And I sat them all down. I said, look, guys, none of you have started a business from scratch. You have all run a business that was in place when you got here, and you did a great job running a business. It's not the same thing as starting a new business from scratch. And so when you're starting something from scratch, you have to get into this flow state every single day, or you get buried in the weeds. So coming back around, today's podcast, I'm going to talk to you about the components of how you get into the flow. Now, I don't want to give you like the only way to do this. Some of these, I've learned over 20 years, different pieces of this flow state from different mentors and from different people that I've worked with, from different experiences that I've had. And I do a flow state that works for me. But I'm going to tell you the absolute very, very, very best flow state, the very best steps or process or ritual or whatever you want to call it for you to get into the flow state. You want to know what it is? It's the one you'll do. So if yours has 25 steps to it, and that's the one you'll do, then do it. And if yours has 3 steps to it, and that's the one you'll do, then do it. And it will transform your life forever, particularly if you addict yourself to this process. If you actually addict your physical body and your mind and your chemical response in your brain, your body, to crave this experience every morning. And there's a process for this. And I've got this 8-week course that I take people through where we, over those 8 weeks, intentionally addict ourselves to a series of steps so that when we wake up, then our body craves this experience. And it's no longer this willpower thing that we're doing. It's actually, we use the physiology and the biology of the body to get us back into that flow state, and it becomes easier and easier and easier over time. And that's where we know what the next step is in our life during times of change and during times of when we're flourishing, when things are going great. It doesn't have to just be during disruption. I didn't have massive disruption in my life 2 weeks ago when I was mapping out starting this podcast and scheduling this week as the week to record the content. It just happened to be life offered me this really cool learning lesson that I can share with you and go, well, this is for real. This is like a huge disruption. My entire family's livelihood, my parents, my income that I had relied on for years and I anticipated relying on for years, shoom, done, hit the reset button. How are you going to respond? So there's 4 components I want you to contemplate, and write this down if you're taking notes. Body, mind, spirit, stress management. Okay, these are the 4 areas for identifying the steps that you want to incorporate that you're going to use for your flow state. So let's begin with the body. And there's an element to this of our modern approach to the body is completely out of alignment with natural law for most of us. The level of stress that we experience as a human being, the amount of time we spend in fight or flight response is not normal for nature and for the evolution of who we are as beings. Fight or flight was reserved for moments when a grizzly bear comes into our yard, 100 feet away. That's when fight or flight, what happened to my wife over the weekend. That's when fight or flight kicks in and we become super focused and our muscles become really responsive and quick to jump. That's what fight or flight is for. But most of us live in a perpetual state of fight or flight. The other interesting thing about this is the anxiety that we experience as human beings. And I listened to this really interesting conversation about anxiety where the guy basically says, look, our species, those that survived 10,000 years ago or 100,000 years ago or whatever it was, were always thinking about how they were going to eat tomorrow. They were always just a little bit anxious of making sure that they were going to survive today and they'd have something to eat tomorrow. So the fact that we often experience anxiety, or for me, I kind of most of the time have a low level of anxiousness, except for when I do my rituals. My rituals each day are it's like my oasis, it's my break, it's my momentary relief from this anxiety that has been my constant companion my entire entrepreneurial career. I might not have had it like my junior year of high school. It kind of seems that way, but that's about the only other time I remember in my life when I wasn't like right on the edge of being a little bit unsure and a little bit afraid and a little bit anxious. And so when we understand this about our biology and we don't make it wrong, we just go, yeah, this is kind of how these things are wired up. What we can do is we can start to work with what we have in alignment with natural law. And so if you think about how we're governing our bodies, most of us, like we wake up to a noise that's not like a natural way of just like waking up to the sunrise. And it startles our bodies. We have a startle response first thing in the day. Then we spike our system with sugar and caffeine and stimulants and Adderall and whatever else is our stimulant of choice, super refined flours and refined sugars. And you know, we drink our carbs. We do all these things in the morning. And it gives us this burst. And it's basically like our body has this natural energy mechanism. And then we have our backup reserves, which are the adrenals. So when we're in alignment with natural law, we go through these phases of activity followed by rest, followed by activity, followed by rest, followed by activity, right? The farmer would have done this. He would have had, or she would have had activity, and then she would have rested, and then she would have had activity, and he would have rested, right? They would have done these different things. But what we do in our modern thing is we're like, go, 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 and we spike ourselves first thing in the morning. And we have this commute into work, which we travel at speeds. You know, my great-grandmother, my great-grandfather had this Model T Ford, and he would drive it down the road on the way home from church, and he would try to get it going like 25 miles an hour. And my great-grandmother would just scream at him that he was going to kill everyone, right? The original trains, and my great-grandfather was an engineer on a train, and so the original trains, don't quote me on this, but I think it was like they wouldn't let them go above 45 miles an hour because they thought the human body would explode if you got going faster than that, right? So now we get in vehicles, and we go sometimes hundreds of miles an hour, and we hurry along to work, and we get to work, and then it's pressure. And then somewhere in the morning, we start to have the dip, right? That's the natural ebb in our energy. That's when if we're listening to the mechanisms of the body, we understand the flow, that's when we go and we do a brain break, or we do a pause, or we go and we breathe, or we go for a quick 5-minute walk, right? We give our body a chance to decompress for a minute. But what most of us do is then we hit that next round of caffeine, or whatever it is that we stimulate ourselves with, sugar or music or something intense or some kind of pressure to spike the adrenals, right? And so then we get another spike, and then we have that lull after lunch, right? And we spike ourselves again. And then by evening time, we just want to anesthetize ourselves, right? We want to have that wine. We want to smoke that weed. We want to decompress. We want to check out with Netflix. We want to just, watch porn or do something to anesthetize the body and shift out of that state of fight or flight that we've been in all day long. And then often we'll take something to sleep, a sleeping pill, or we'll do something so we can sleep during the night, right? That's not in alignment with natural law. And I'm not saying this from a place of judgment. Like, my life is not necessarily like the example of always living these principles. I'm going to teach you some stuff, but I don't always live this, and I'm not ever going to pretend that I do. The idea is starting to get yourself, without any shame, back into alignment with the natural law, so you get into the natural rhythms and the natural energy cycles. Does this make sense? So we have our physical body, and the physical body has some primary needs. If you think about, like, what is our absolute number one primary need as a human being to stay alive? It's breathing, right? If we don't breathe for a few minutes, then we die. So breathing is our body's primary need. And I think that should be something that we include in our ritual, in our alignment with getting into the flow state. Now, the idea is if we can get in more and more in alignment with the physical body, with its actual needs, that this flow state becomes easier to get into. Whoa, I got something touching me in the water. Sorry, something got on my ankle. My fight or flight response just went off, right? This adrenal response is like, whoa, what is it? Even though there's no like alligators or venomous snakes that swim in this water. My fight or flight still went off when something wrapped around my leg just now. This is what happens in our body, right? This is what it's wired up for. But it was never intended to be run off of the adrenals. The adrenals were there for the backup. And so what happens, and this is super common among the executives that I've worked with, is adrenal fatigue. Right? We hit burnout. And the caffeine doesn't work, the Adderall doesn't work, the drugs don't work, the microdosing doesn't work, the alcohol We need more and more and more to sedate ourselves at the end of the day. And I've heard these executives come up and they're like, they want to do like a weekend retreat. Be like, okay, get me a weekend retreat, get my energy back up, get me back in this game, let's go. The problem is, if we drive ourselves to that point of adrenal fatigue, it's not a weekend to bring it back. It's months and months and months of actually following the rules. And then your body starts to get back into that natural energy cycle. And so this is also part of why this flow ritual is so critically important for you to create the life that you want. Because it's about getting yourself in alignment with these natural rhythms and natural processes. So if you look at your physical body, the primary need is breathing. What's the secondary need? It's water, right? And so I think water needs to be part of this process. And water before coffee is what I really recommend. I also have a big belief of drinking a big glass of water before drinking alcohol, if someone wants to do that, so they can hydrate their body in a way that really gives it what it needs before they're going to anesthetize it with something else that's going to require a lot of water to cleanse out of the system. So what are the other needs? We have a primary need of eating, right? If we go for a few weeks without eating, we die. And so when we look at that, if we can start to eliminate some of the things that really don't serve us, and we start to fill ourselves with what we actually need. I went through a period of time in my life where I got very, very sick. So much stress. It was after I'd crashed my business and my identity was just crushed. I thought I was such a loser. And I was in hiding and my physical body got really sick and I couldn't sleep for the better part of a month. I was in like horrible pain, had a bunch of digestive issues and like so much pain that I stopped eating because it hurt so much to have food passing through me with all the ulcers and all the different problems I was having. That I lost like 27 pounds and I don't have a lot of weight to lose. I got down to like 152 pounds. And a friend of mine saw me and he goes, dude, you look, it was the only time I went out that month. He goes, you look like you're gonna die. And he said, come to my house and eat with us and you'll be better in a week. And I did, I moved to his house and I stayed there for a week. And within a week, all of that stuff that was going on in my system had healed. And it just took me a little while to gain my weight back. But it was because I started to fill my body with what I needed, particularly through a green smoothie where I blend up spinach and kale and apple and orange and chia seed and some protein. And I would drink like a gallon of this stuff every single day. I was filling my body with what it needed to heal itself. And I made it taste good, so it was sweet. I know some people are like, oh, that sounds disgusting. I know, I get it. It sounds green, but it actually tastes really good. But when we fill ourselves with what we need, then our body does its job. It knows how to heal. It knows how to stay alive. It knows how to take care of itself if we just give it what it needs. And so the body has to be a big part of this. The other part of this is rest. Learning to slow down and to take these little breaks. And I'll talk about some strategies in some of the other podcasts I do with executives in the very busy schedules of how to build in rest as a strategy to win, not just as a weakness. Like there's so many that are like, oh, that's just, if I have to rest during the day, that means I'm not tough enough or strong enough. Bullshit, stop that. The people that are running that race are the ones that end up with adrenal fatigue. They're the ones that we try to chase after and run with and outperform, but they're not following the natural laws and it's not sustainable. So as you start to follow these natural laws, this is where you start to access your power. You access your clarity, you access your stamina and your drive, and you get the things done that are the winning moves, so you begin to experience that life you want. You connect with your partner in a way that feels really good and rewarding as a human being. Your body starts to have energy and vitality, and it feels good to be inside of it. Your finances increase because you do the right moves in your business or in your job. You do the moves that make the most money. And so money becomes easier in your life. This is what happens. And if you don't follow this, then it progressively becomes harder and harder and harder. And we have to push more, and that push energy becomes more depleting, and we end up in this place broken. Okay, enough of the preaching. Next area. So we got to look at our physical body and say, how do we get in alignment with our physical body as part of our flow ritual? The next area we want to look at is the mind. And I really think it's important that we really challenge the stories about ourselves that we're not enough. This whole concept of shame, I'm not enough, like where I am is not okay. That's the shame message. Where I am in my body is not okay. I actually had this thought before I got on this video. I was like, oh, maybe I should do some push-ups first so I look a little bit, a little bit more fit. Right? So we have this story that like, however my body is right now, that's not okay. But if I had a little more muscle, then I could do this video where I'm shirtless, right? It's like these illusions of, man, if I could get my hair to stop turning gray, then that would be okay, right? We have these shame stories that say where we are is not okay. But in the mindset piece, there's a couple of things we have to do. The first is we have to change and eliminate and rewrite the shame story. Because if the story underlying everything we do is, I don't measure up, I'm not enough, I'm not lovable because of what I've done, I can't be loved because of that, or because of who I am, or I'm fundamentally flawed, there's something wrong with me, we will sabotage the things that we want in our life. So we have to do the work to rewrite that. And there's going to be a lot of conversation about rewriting your story in this podcast. So just stick around and have fun with it. This is a lifelong process and a lifelong journey. I'll give you lots of different tips and tricks and tools and processes to help you to be able to do that. The other one we have to do is to fill our mind with what we want more of. Now, the brain science here says that, well, one study I read says that the brain does this flush every night of information while we sleep, because it can't contain everything that we've taken in during that day. And so it does this flush, and the flush, basically the brain, in deciding what to keep in long-term memory and what to release so that there's a fresh mind in the morning, is based on what we thought about just before going to bed. The brain determines that whatever we thought about just before going to bed is what's important for us to retain. The other part of this that you should understand, and I'll talk about this more in the brain science of change, but there's this process called myelination in the brain, that when we feel a feeling, we fire a series of neurons in the brain, and it lays down a layer of myelin. And that process of myelination is how we ingrain new beliefs in us. That's how we actually change it. And so the repetition of the new beliefs that we want to incorporate is a way, sorry, I just saw something. I spent a lot of time in this river as a kid, a lot of time in this river. And there sometimes are water snakes that will swim across the water. And out of the corner of my eye, there was the movement of a snake. And what I've read is that the human eye is really attuned to the movement of snakes. That we are, so like I have this rope in the water, now that I'm thinking about snakes, and it wiggles sometimes out of the corner of my eye, and it's like, ah! I apologize for my own distraction here. But this is like when we start to understand how we are as human beings and we don't make it wrong. We just go, oh, that is really fascinating. Like how we're wired up for adrenaline, how we're wired up for survival, how we're wired up to stay in our tribe and not part ways with our tribe because it meant death to our ancestors. It's really fascinating because then we don't have to shame ourselves, and then we can start to do things that are in alignment with how the brain works, right? This process of change I'm teaching you, I think it has to be simple, and it has to be something I can do on my worst day. Those are my rules, because the brain is going to fight us in this change. And so when we start to get in alignment with how the brain already functioned and how it already processes, how the body already functions and already processes, and we start to just tweak it and game it and tweak it and tweak it and tweak it, we start to have this incremental change over time. This is the true path of transformation. Transformation generally does not happen in one big burst. And look, I put on events and we do big burst activities and we have fun and we'll do like things that create adrenaline. But real transformation happens in the little incremental steps. My brain doctor kept on drilling this into me. I kept coming into him and going, okay, doc, like let's do a serious workout today with my brain. I want this to heal fast. And he goes, no, you will not heal if you do a serious brain workout. What you need to do is you have frequency over intensity. Frequency over intensity. Write it down. Frequency over intensity. This is how you get what you want in life. And so this process of getting in the flow state, of doing things to eliminate the shame and rewrite the shame story, and doing things to fill your mind with what it is that you really require. Frequency over intensity. This is how you change who you are. This is how you change your tribe. This is how you create what you want in your life. Same thing in relationships. Frequency over intensity. And with money, frequency over intensity. Base hits, not home runs. If you do this, then you will succeed. In my real estate business, my partner and I did, I think it was like 148 deals in a row profitably. And then I watched my buddy do this big deal. He made like 300,000 on the deal. And I'm like, holy crap, I want one of those. And so I went after a couple of those, and then the market turned and it completely wiped me out, swinging for the fences and going for the home run. Even though I had a model that was so predictable and that worked every time I stayed with my model. As soon as I broke with the model, I got my ass handed to me. Okay, so now the next part of this, that's the mind, right? We got to do some reprogramming work. We can't go with the mind we have right now if we want change. The mind we have right now is getting us what we have right now. And so we have to do the steps of change. Now, the next part of this is spirit. And this can be all kinds of interpretation for you. So some people that have a belief in a higher power can have this be some sort of connective experience with the universe or with God or whatever that belief is that they have with nature. Others, if that doesn't really fit, I clearly have something coming up here. I talk about this throughout the podcast, but I was raised in a fundamentalist religion where my family was fifth generation. So my entire circle, my entire tribe was part of this. And in deciding that I believe different things than them, it was psychologically one of the most difficult things I ever went through, was parting with my tribe on those things. And so I still have some stuff because I don't really know what I believe spiritually. But I do know this. That's why I bring it around here. I say I really respect it if people have a spiritual belief, because there's times in my life when I haven't. And I really respect it when people are agnostic or don't have spiritual beliefs at all, because I've also had that belief in my life. And so this concept of spirit, though, doesn't necessarily have to be something like religious or spiritual or something like that. It can be about connecting to your inner voice and your inner spirit and your self, a deep connectedness to self experience. Now, a lot of times this place of connectedness with self, like for a lot of people, particularly guys that I talk to, and I don't know from women because I'm not a woman, I don't know what this experience is like, so I don't even want to pretend to. But a lot of guys, the experience of orgasm is the most connected experience that they have to themselves. And the other time that people mention is when they're high, right? When they're on a substance, that they have this deeply connected experience to self, depending on the substance. Some substances totally numb us and disconnect us from ourselves, whereas others, it's a very self-connected experience. What I'm suggesting here is that there's between the kind of like getting high, either through orgasm, really stimulating the body, or using some kind of substance to stimulate the body, there's a more middle ground moment of awareness, getting really deeply connected just in a moment. And it might only be for 30 seconds or a minute. But the idea is that we get connected to ourselves, we get connected to that inner voice. And this is where I talk about the radical intuition. This is where that radical intuition becomes our guide. It becomes our friend. It becomes something we begin to trust. That there's a wisdom in us, in taking all this data and all the survival of our ancestors. There's a wisdom in being able to be guided from within and a connectedness to that inner voice. And so this is something we need to cultivate. Maybe you've already been cultivating this, maybe you haven't, but it can be cultivated. And it starts incrementally, a little piece at a time, in a daily ritual. Then the last part of it, that's the last part. You can put anything you want into your ritual, but the majors is stress management. And the reason for this is that, and I learned meditation from one of the best, most qualified meditation teachers in the world. He taught a lot of, I don't know if he's that most qualified, but he taught a lot of he worked with like the Beatles and the Beach Boys and a bunch of actors, Anthony Hopkins, Diana Ross, Michael Jackson, people like that. But he really knows his stuff, and he's been doing it for 30 years. And he came out to my house and he taught me meditation. And he said that the nervous system is like this spring that gets wound tighter and tighter and tighter during the day. And that if we don't release that pressure, that stress off the nervous system, then the brain craves adrenaline to release that stress in a big burst. And so what happens is, if we don't have a practice of releasing stress off the nervous system, then what happens is our brain is create these addictive, compulsive patterns towards adrenaline. And it could be adrenaline through music, it could be adrenaline through entertainment, right? So you look at sports, or you look at porn, or you look at drama TV or violent TV, and it spikes the adrenals, right? Or you look at foods, right? Super refined foods or dangerous activities or driving fast or conflict or living in a perpetual state of fight or flight with danger, like doing dangerous things. Sex can be a big adrenaline burst, depending on how we approach that. So there's all these activities that we do that can become really compulsive and addictive if we are allowing our nervous system and our emotional impulsive feelings to govern how we act as a human being. And if we're not releasing that stress off the nervous system, then by default, our brain is governing those things and commanding those things through compulsive and impulsive ways. And so it's really, really important that we build into our daily regimen, we follow this natural law of the brain and this buildup of adrenaline in our nervous system, so we can release this in a way that we're not governed by those things. And I'm just going to tell you from my experience, I lived incredibly compulsive and impulsive for a lot of years of my life and driven by a lot of intense emotions that I shamed myself for. And then I would act out in ways that were compulsive, and then I'd feel horrible shame afterwards. I just thought I was an awful person because of it. And as I began to have a practice of meditation, that need to act out compulsively and impulsively, the draw was no longer so strong. Sometimes it's there, but I take cravings as a signal now that it's like when my engine starts to warm up in my car, then I take that as a signal that maybe I need to slow the car down and let the engine cool down a little bit. Same thing for cravings in my body. When I really start craving some kind of compulsive activity to spike my system, then I take that just simply as a signal, my body going, hey dude, hey, we're overheating over here. Hey, if you don't slow it down, we're taking over and you're gonna act out compulsively and you're gonna feel like shit afterwards. So when we follow this, body, mind, spirit, stress management, right? These four major areas of our ritual and of our a way of getting into the flow state. We have this moment where we get really quiet and we slow down and we've given our body what it needs and we've given our mind what it needs. We've connected to ourselves and we're in a moment of having released stress. And it's in that space that we get the winning move. We get the answer. We get the radical intuition of what to do next. So I hope this has been helpful for you just as a general guiding principle. I want to invite you to create steps for you to practice getting into the flow state in the way that works for you. And for those that would like a little, maybe a suggestion of the steps that I like to take, I've created a little mini course and it's free. Just put your email, click on the link on the page here, put your email address in and I'll email it to you. But it's a mini course where I talk about the first three and kind of for me the fundamental steps of my morning ritual of what I do and how I do this in my life. And I've made it's got to be easy, it's got to be simple, and it's got to be something I can do on my worst day. And so if you want that, just click on the link, put in your email address, and I will send that to you. And I really invite you to take a look at your life and look at how you can get yourself in alignment with these natural laws to be experiencing more of what it is that you want to experience. And I'm happy that this video is coming to an end because this water's cold. I look forward to talking to you on the next podcast. In the meantime, create yourself a fantastic day.
If you're ready now to access the superpower of the flow state in your life, download the free mini course to learn the 3 easy steps of Tony's morning ritual. Now go and create some luck.